Welcome to Summerlin Church. As I say every week, we're just glad you're joining us. I know it's an odd time of life when we're joining virtually or digitally, but ironically, it has enabled us to reach out to many, many people, even around the globe, and we welcome all of you, whether you're from this country, this town, this state, or whether you're from India or other places around the world. We welcome you. We're finishing up a series on tools for the journey. The journey is our journey of following Jesus the Christ. And it is a journey. It's circuitous. It has ups and downs and curves and stormy weather and beautiful weather. It is actually a journey along the way, as we saw, that starts with a decision and also has some decisions along the way to keep going. For example, to make turn right or turn left, or oh my word, I got lost, I need to get back on the path. It's a true journey with all the adventures that can come with a journey. And we're in the final stage of that, looking at the parts of the Great Commandment. You'll remember they asked Jesus this question. One of the teachers of the law came and he asked Jesus, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So we're looking at the last two of these. I've reordered them a little bit from how I read it, but we're going to look at today loving God with your soul and your strength. We looked at loving Him with your heart, loving Him with your mind last week, and soul and strength we're combining into one. I saw a movie just last night, actually, and we're posting it on our website. It's called Godspeed. And without ruining the movie for you, it's not a full-length movie. I think it's about a 38-minute sort of a documentary. I want to share a part of it. It touched me for two reasons. One was the actual content of the documentary, but the other is who made it. Because a very dear friend of mine who lived in Seattle named Don Valencia, you've heard me speak about him, passed away now about 10 or 12 years ago, I would guess. And I went up when his doctor was getting ready to do a final diagnosis. I flew to Seattle to be with him and to sit in the final diagnosis. And it was a terrible diagnosis. It was incurable cancer, the worst possible kind of fast-spreading cancer. And there were 4 or 5 of us who came to be with him, of course, as well as his family and close friends. But there were 4 of us that had been together in various ways. And we decided we would go out to dinner that night at a very famous restaurant. I mean, it seems odd to go out for what was hopefully it was going to be a celebrating time, but it turned out not to be. And we went to this wonderful restaurant called Canlis Restaurant. Those of you in Seattle will know where it is. Very fancy, very beautiful. And we had, it was just a very tender time. And about a year later, he was still alive, but not by much. And we met back in that, we were going to meet back in the Canlis Restaurant, and he was too ill to even go there. And so the people from that restaurant beautifully catered the meal we would have had into the hospital. And then we lost Don very shortly after that. Well, the son of the owner, if I understand this correctly, of that restaurant made this film called Godspeed. And he is an Episcopal priest. And the story is about him. He goes to England to study, actually to Scotland, I believe, and winds up in an internship, you might call it there. And in the internship, he meets with the senior pastor, rector of the church, and he shows up, this young American guy, and he says, "Oh, hi, I'm Mark, and where's my office?" And the senior pastor, rector, says, office? And then Mark says, where's your office? And he says, office? And then as Mark tells the story, the senior pastor brings him out to the front of the building and points out at the town and points to the sign of the church that has the senior pastor's name and home telephone number on it. And he says, this is your office, the entire town. And this is the way people will get in touch with you. And the way you get in touch with them is you walk around the town. You just are present. That is your office. And Mark's an American from Seattle, and he's used to hustle and bustle. And the first person he meets is this rather fascinating character who looks like something out of central casting for Braveheart, a Scottish man with reddish hair and a little bit graying and a big beard and in a kilt, and the unlikely friendship that they strike up because Mark slowed down to walk from place to place and to meet and to be with the people. You see, that's the way Jesus was. Jesus walked everywhere. Jesus had time to be with people. If we're on a journey with Jesus, it's going to have to start looking a little more like his. Now, we can't slow down physically always in our culture, but there are other ways to slow down so that we become sure that we are fully here where we are, not somewhere else in our mind, not in the past, not in the future, fully here, and we're fully in. We're totally committed. When you met Jesus on the path, he was fully there, wherever he was. If he was with you, he was with you 100%. He was not only fully with you, he was fully in. He was there to be with you in the fullest sense of the word. In the documentary, it's called Godspeed. And of course, we often say Godspeed to you. And what we mean is we hope your trip goes quickly. And he makes the point by quoting a Japanese theologian that I have quoted before myself, saying that God's speed is actually 3 miles an hour, which is the generally average speed of a person who's walking. And so you don't have to speed up to get to God. Sometimes we think that seek the kingdom with all your heart, speed up and get to God. You don't have to speed up to get to God. You probably have to slow down to catch up with God, because God's in the lives of the people all around you. Jesus was fully present and fully in. Do you remember it says in one of the passages as he's getting ready to go to Jerusalem, it says this in Luke chapter 9. As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, so this is a serious time in Jesus' life, this is a turning point. He knew where he was heading, he knew what was going to happen, he'd been given that word that he would die when he went up to Jerusalem. As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He resolutely, the old King James, I believe, says, he set his face like a flint toward Jerusalem. You see, he was fully there and he was fully in. He knew that's where he was heading. And he was up for the task. And he was going to live every moment fully in his own skin. He gets there, of course, and he's fully there and he's fully in when he's arrested. His disciples pull out swords to fight to keep him from being arrested, and he knew resolutely that this was where he was meant to be. He was there in the Garden of Gethsemane before he was arrested, and he said, "Not my will, O Father, but yours be done." He needed clarity, sweat drops of blood. He prayed 3 different times while his disciples fell asleep. And he sweat drops of blood, in my opinion, because he needed clarity. Is this where I'm supposed to fully be and fully be in? And he got the clarity he needed from God the Father. And he was fully there and he persevered through that dark time. And even at his trial, he was fully present. And he knew somehow that he was not supposed to defend himself. And so it says on multiple occasions, he opened not his mouth. He was fully in and fully there, fully present. So if we're following him, we're meant to be fully in, and we're meant to be fully where we are. And that means not just physically where you are, but in your own life. You've heard me say, quoting Jim Finley, wouldn't it be terrible if you got to the end of your life and realized you'd never showed up in it? You showed up in somebody else's life, in some figment of your imagination of what you think you're supposed to be, instead of being who you really are, fully present and fully in. You'll remember Moses when he went and he was shepherding his flock, and he saw this odd thing of a bush burning. And he went over and he heard his name come from the burning bush. And he says, "Here I am." So he was fully in. If he hadn't been fully there, would he have even seen this amazing thing that then changed the course of human history? He was fully in. He said, "Here am I. I'm here, Lord." Samuel, same thing. The little boy Samuel was training to be a priest or prophet, a priest, I should say, and he heard the voice of the Lord in the middle of the night. And he didn't know quite what to do, so he went to his mentor and said, "What do I do?" And the mentor said, "Look, just say, 'Here am I, Lord, your servant.'" And he heard the voice again, and he said the beautiful words, and they must have been true for him because he's one of the few people in the Bible that nothing negative is ever recorded about his life. He said, "Here am I, Lord." There's an old joke that, when you hear the Lord's voice, you say, "Lord, here am I, send Peter." Send somebody else. Here I am, but send somebody else. Well, no, it's the opposite. Here I am, and I'm fully ready. And then, of course, you have Jesus himself in John 8, not saying, "Here am I, Lord, to do your will." He just says, "I am. I am who I am," using the ancient name for God, applying it to his own situation, his own sense of divinity. I am. Are you who you are meant to be? Because God is who God is meant to be. I am that I am. I am who I am, God says. That's when Moses asks him, "Who should I say sent me?" Back to the Moses story. And he says, "Tell them Yahweh, tell them I am who I am has sent you." God is who God is, and God wants us to be who we are truly meant to be. Now, this fully present and fully in, you could almost say it's like total commitment. But I want to be careful here. It's the exact opposite of extremism. It's the exact opposite of fanaticism. Fanaticism is a shallow commitment to a shallow vision, to an imposter vision, to something that just a counterfeit vision. The vision that God has is a vision of love, a vision of transformation, a vision of inclusion and welcome and uplifting of the human spirit. And it only comes, the kind of fully present and fully in that I'm talking about, only comes, frankly, with a lot of work and a lot of suffering. The people I know who I would say, I feel fully present when they are around. I feel like they are fully present to me, and it calls out my own openness and presence. Those people have either prayed a lot or suffered a lot, or both, most usually. There's a deep interior work that we're meant to do, and we talked about last week about laziness, spiritual and intellectual laziness. And that's what, unfortunately, many of our spiritual lives look like. They're just flat. They're not deep. The roots don't go down into the soil very deep. And when we go down into the soil of our life, it means how we were brought up. It means understanding the culture you were born into, its positive sides and its weak sides. It means looking at the scriptures for the revelation of God in word, and most importantly, the revelation of God in Jesus, the living Word, to look at the life of Jesus and to say to yourself, am I fully present in the way he was fully present? I remember one time when I was working in Washington, D.C., my mentor, who was a very charismatic figure, and just had a dynamism hard to describe. And, you know, it's so funny with dynamic people. Sometimes they're really on and sometimes they're not so on, you know, and that was certainly true of my mentor. But one day I saw him when he was fully on, not just one time, but this one time I remember. And there was a very important person from a Latin American country. She was a cabinet minister in that country, and she was going to be running for president of that country. And she was Lebanese background, but Lebanese, in this case, Ecuadorian. And she came to meet with my mentor. A mutual friend had encouraged her to do that. Now, this is a very elegant, urbane, brilliant woman, multilingual, very, very worldly wise, you might say. And, you know, when you're in a position that high, people always want things from you. And my experience is when you're with people like that, they're a little standoffish. They want to kind of take their measure of you. And my mentor, who was then in his probably late 70s or maybe early 80s, came to the front steps of the home we were at, and she was coming up the steps, and, you know, she had a driver and people opening the doors for her, and she came up very elegantly dressed and very proper. And I'll never forget, he met her like this. He grabbed her arms, you know, her forearms like this, and he looked her right in the eye. And her name was Yvonne. He said, "Yvonne, we've heard so much about you. We're so glad you've come. Welcome." And I watched this urbane, amazing woman just melt, because she could see in his eyes and she could feel in his touch. He was fully present to her, and he really cared. And he really did. It wasn't fake. It was very true. And they sat down and had a tremendous conversation that I was privileged to participate in. I saw just the melting of human sort of a rigid outside structure for self-protection. I saw it melt away in seconds. That must have been what it was like when you met Jesus along the road and he saw you and he said, "Come, follow me." It was like he grabbed your forearms and looked into your eyes, and you knew he was fully present to your life and wanting you to be fully present to your own life. In fact, when you were in the presence of Jesus, if you were open to it, you got healed. You got healed. Now, I'm not just talking about the physical healings, which he he did so many of, and we only have a scattering of them recorded. But the healing on the inside that happened, even when the exterior didn't need healing. People's hearts were changed. Forgiveness flowed. Fresh starts began. This Jesus, when you were in his presence, healing was the natural aspect of being there. Because you sensed he was not only there with you, he was there for you. So if in Christ, God is fully here and fully in, then we're meant to live lives that are fully here and fully in. Just think over your last week. Maybe even just yesterday. I was thinking about this myself, and I realized there's so many times I'm not fully present to the moment. I'm not fully present to the person right in front of me. Right now it might be on Zoom, but there's still the person in front of me. And sometimes I'm not even fully present to myself. And frankly, I would say most of the time. When I watched this movie Godspeed, or this documentary, I have to say it was very convicting, because it's about a pastor learning to slow down and get to know all the names of all his people and walking the streets to be with them. And I thought, wow, I'm not as fully present as that. I wish I was. I want to be more that way. So how do we do that? How do we become more fully present to God, more fully present to ourselves, more fully present to others? How do we become fully in with God, fully in with our true self, and fully in with what is the best in others? Well, I think it just comes down to intention, as I've said so many times. You have to decide that's what you want. And then you have to work at it. If you're going to build a building, you have to excavate and build a solid foundation. If there's already a building on there, you've got to knock it down. And we have buildings on our very feeble foundations, what some have called the false self, kind of this ephemeral version of ourselves that really isn't rooted in anything as stable as God and God's love. And so at some level, we've got to dig and excavate down to find out what are the foundations of our own life, and are they worthy of a fully present life? And if they're not, rebuild them. I can guarantee you the best foundation is the love of God, to build your life on that foundation rather than on the weak foundations that were given by our culture, even by our religious traditions at times, by our families of origin, and by some of the traumas and difficulties we've all faced in our real lives. Somehow to dig down and find a foundation of God's full acceptance and love, and to live there more often, to let that permeate us and come up, transform us from within, so that we can spread it outside of our own lives to others. So I wish you Godspeed, which may mean slowing down to catch up to God. It may mean slowing down to catch up to yourself. It may mean slowing down to catch up to your neighbor and to offer them the kind of love and care that God in Christ offers to you and every other person on this planet.
May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart bless your name, Jesus. And the deeds of the day and the truth in my way speak of you, Jesus. For this is what I'm glad to do. It's time to live a life of love that pleases you. And I will give my all to you. Surrender everything I have and follow you. I will follow you. Lord, will you be my vision? Lord, will you be my guide? Be my hope, be my life in the way. And I'll look not for riches, nor for praises on earth,